So the FD role was about putting yourself in customer shoes and trying to understand not just what they said were their biggest problems, but what you observed were their issues and how you could, being super intimately familiar with the software, how you could help them customize and build it to their advantage so that it ran amazing workflows and will work for them. So it really is like, it's a mix of engineering, it's a mix of like BD and customer success. And the problem is, I think a lot of people are basically just thinking of it as like, well, we have a product and we will slightly customize it for our customer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of AI Without Borders. I'm thrilled to have Jessica Leão. Jess is a partner at Decibel, where she invests in infrastructure software companies. She has worked on deals with companies like MosaicML, acquired by Databricks, and was previously a forward deploy engineer at Palantir. But most importantly for this podcast, Jess is originally from Brazil. Jess, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thanks so much. Rare to have anyone actually know how to pronounce my last name correctly, so this is great.
We're starting on a good foot.
Yeah.
So you had a journey coming from Salvador, Brazil to where you are today, which is something not many people have done. How do you think that experience and the steps you took along the way shaped how you work or even how you make investment decisions?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's funny, I've now lived in the US for 13 years, but I do really feel deep down inside like I'm still very Brazilian. I think there's some sort of like Brazilian soul that reflects a lot in the day-to-day life, which is like Brazilians, I think, tend to be really optimistic and extremely hardworking people. So I do think I try to bring that with me wherever I go. I think also just my upbringing taught me a lot about operating within constraints. I think it was really not a straight line to go from where I grew up and sort of what my life was to the life I have today. Just taught me a lot about resilience and grit and essentially like how to make the impossible happen sometimes. I think, like the easiest way to annoy me is to tell me that something can't be done without thinking it through or trying to be creative. We always say in Brazil, there's an expression called o jeitinho brasileiro, which means the little Brazilian way. And the little Brazilian way just means that there's not really like true no's. Like most things are maybes and you can figure it out. I try to bring that a lot to investing, really around trying to think about what's possible. One of my favorite quotes, I think it was actually Nat Friedman who said it, but Patrick Collison was the one who posted it on Twitter. And it goes something like, pessimists sound smart, but optimists make money. And I really believe in that. I really think that if you just look at what's right in front of you, you can really miss the forest for the trees. And so I always try to think about what's possible and try to also bring that when I work with founders. I think that I try to be much more of a steady person to be around them. Even when things are really hard, I tend to be able to see how we can get out of a situation or how to make things work.
And I know some investors, when they invest, look for signs that the person faced early adversity when they invest. Is that something that you look for in the founders that you tend to like the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think that founders come from all different types of backgrounds. So I really try not to be prescriptive. I don't think you have to have faced like significant drama or adversity to be a resilient person. That said, I do think it's important that when things get hard, you don't crumble. And so I think essentially I think the best founders like need to be really hyper aware of how things go wrong. So it's hard to be a really successful founder if you're like way too bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and like kind of live in la la land. And there are two extremes, right? Like I think I do really believe it's important to be an optimist. And so if you are always really fearful and you're making every single decision in your company based on how things might go wrong, that's not good. You're gonna really undershoot. At the same time, if you're bulldozing straight through and imagining that everything is always going to go your way and you have no conception of how to deal when things don't and how to quickly recover, that's really tough too. And so I don't think you have to have face adversity in order to do that, but you do have to be willing to, you have to be able to face it. One of the things that I really believe in is I don't think a startup actually fails because it runs out of money. I think it fails sometimes because like the founder ran out of reasons to believe, sort of ran out of gas and just like wasn't able to like keep switching or pivoting. And the way that you do that is by really pushing through. And sometimes you have to chew glass is like one of the expressions we always said at Palantir, like, and go through really hard things. But we be willing to face the music and be realistic. So all of those things I think are important, more necessarily than exactly the experiences that someone went through. I think that great founders come in all shapes and forms.
As I was reading about your story, one of the things that stood out is that you were one of the lead investors in MosaicML at your previous fund, making an early bet in AI. So you were early and ahead of that curve. What drew you to the company, and what were you able to see before everyone caught up at the time?
Yeah, so at my prior fund, we invested in their A1 round. So the background, maybe if I can play the movie a little earlier, because I think it'll help make it make sense. So when I was at Palantir, the very last project I worked on was the new platform release for Palantir Gotham, which was Palantir's government product. And for the first time, we were adding modules on top of the base platform. And one of the modules was called Ava, and it stood for Artificial Virtual Assistant. And it was Palantir's, I think, like very first foray into AI. This was in 2019. So this is before even GPT-3 came out, because GPT-3 came out in 2020. So we were doing it more like rules-based machine learning, et cetera. But you learned a lot while building that product. And also, I think I was able to see firsthand the impact that something like that had for customers, and their workflows was really transformative. And that was like early days of AI. I remember a year later when GPT-3 came out, it was like a big lightning bulb moment of like, wow, like all of that development we did last year now could have been an API call. Models seem like they're improving a lot. So I've always been really interested in the space. If you play the movie forward in 2022, Stable Diffusion had come out in the summer, and I think enterprises were finally starting to think about, how do I adopt large language models? But this is before ChatGPT came out, so it wasn't really in the mainstream public consciousness yet. And one of the ways that I do investing is I try to spend a lot of time putting myself in the shoes of customers and trying to understand what the customer actually needs. What are they actually going to buy? Because you do have to make a commercial product. And so I was talking to a lot of, would-be customers, like Fortune 500 companies, mid-stage companies, et cetera, and hearing like, why aren't you adopting AI? What are the blockers? There's a lot of buzz going around. What are the issues? And almost everyone cited concerns around data ownership. They didn't really want to share their data with like one centralized company. A lot of folks were concerned about cost. It just also felt like these models were very generic, and how are they actually going to be useful? I do think some of that sentiment has changed over time, but back then that was really, really prevalent. And so it really got me thinking about what is a good alternative? Like, how do we solve the issue of privacy? How do we solve the issue of data and data ownership? And in doing research, I came across this blog post that Mosaic had published about how they had trained like an equivalent like GPT-3 model, open source, and it cost less than $500,000. I think the actual cost was something like 450. That was like many orders of magnitude cheaper than what the public, I would say, consciousness thought those models would cost. And I mean, that was like really impressive. And it felt like that would really solve the issue. Like, what if you could build proprietary models? They could be more domain specific. They could be using your proprietary company data. They could be smaller. They could be cheaper. And so when we try to get in front of the company, that was like really the overarching thesis there. And it's just a really special team. I feel so fortunate that I got a chance to work with them. And of course, now they're at Databricks and doing amazing things. I know I am obviously biased, but I'll credit a lot of Databricks' success and growth in AI over the past couple of years to bringing on the MosaicML team on. I think they're really, really special, exceptional people.
And you mentioned your approach to investing is about understanding what are some of those customer needs. What are some of those that you're now seeing today as you put in the customer shoes and speak with them?
I think the thing on everyone's mind right now is one, how to make agents actually useful. I run this group that is like on the DL, but it's called the AI Center of Excellence. And it's a group of CTOs, chief product officers, heads of AI of Fortune 500 companies. We meet every couple of weeks or so to discuss a topic, but we do a Chatham House rule style. So no one can publish things about it afterwards, no attribution. It's really a place for execs to gather and discuss like, what are the issues that they're facing in deploying AI in production. And famously, one exec who is awesome. I think she's amazing, but shall not be named given the rules. Said jokingly in one of our meetings a couple of months ago that co-pilots were a scam because they totally were. You know, you're essentially like latching on like AI on top of traditional SaaS products, charging the customers more from it, but then you still have the human in the loop, like still, so you're not really saving any time. Like it's not super clear that there's like true ROI there. It's just more expensive. So everyone is thinking about agents but then the issue becomes like, when are we really ready to have agents be super reliable and do everything last mile? Do you still have to have some level of human in the loop? I think those are all open questions. And I do think the other question is as just as more AI is added onto each product, and obviously AI has a cost, and so many of the companies are going to have to charge for some level of usage. What is the right amount of usage that you want as an exec? Like, how much do you really want to pay for this? How do you think about our ROI calculations? And so I think that that's really top of mind. But I think the most incredible thing that has been the case over the past 2 years is that everyone is really thinking seriously about this. I would say in past, I try to be a student of history and a student of, shifts in technology. And when I think of the past, it took a really long time for enterprises to want to adopt new technology. They're usually really resistant. And that's not the case now. Everyone is like really, really hungry for solutions. So it's a really fun time to be, dealing in the land of early stage startups coming up with new ideas.
Yeah, no, been seeing those graphs as well on that pace of adoption, which makes this definitely an amazing time to be in this job. And
Yeah.
we were early speaking about like before entering BC, you work as a forward deploy engineer at Palantir on the well-known R2D2 team. The forward deploy engineer is now one of the most sought after roles in startups. What's your take on startups adopting this model? I've been thinking a lot. On one hand, it offers clear benefits. It allows you to be close with the customer, kind of embed that ideally into the product. On the other hand, there are some cases that I do worry that it may act as a band-aid for a weak platform in cases where it not necessarily be needed. For you that you were directly exposed in the role, when does it make sense and when does not? And even if we can put a step earlier, how you would define personally the role of a forward deploy engineer?
Yeah. So, first of all, I think this has been one of the most hilarious things to experience personally because when I was a forward deployed engineer, that was the thing that everyone made fun of Palantir for. Everyone is like, oh my God, you guys are glorified consultants. Like, what is this company as a services business? It's so uninteresting. Lo and behold, obviously, like, we're the last ones laughing because Palantir has been incredibly successful, just keeps on growing, is doing super well. I do think we'll continue to be an incredibly successful company. And I do think the FDE model was core to it. And like, no, we were not consultants, but now it's funny to see the entire world wake up and suddenly every single job posting that there is for a forward deployed engineer. So, I actually think I will direct people to someone that has written about this really thoughtfully. So Ted Mabray, who is the like head of global, like the global head of all commercial for Palantir, wrote a great blog post called Starry, that isn't an FDE. And it's really great. And I think that what he's trying to describe is like the point of an FDE is like not to be customer success person. I think like the two failure modes is I see some startups hiring for an FDE, but all they're really doing is doing like sales engineering or trying to help companies like onboard. So that's not really what an FDE is for. And then some of them are just like customer success with like some technical background, which is also not what an FDE is. The FD role was like really, really specific, but also took many forms. So in the case of Palantir, Palantir works with like super, super mission critical companies, either like the government and government agencies or companies in shipping and healthcare and supply chain, just like really, really complex operations. And I do think it's a mistake to think that software can be one size fits all. Like if you're trying to clean up the data pipelines of a global shipping company and try to make that data usable, the workflows for what is important to a shipping company is just very different to what is important to a healthcare company or to a manufacturer or something else. And so it's a little bit of like getting that last mile. So you have the base platform, which is an amazingly complex product. And then like, how do you actually solve an issue for them and make them see it? Because it's a really powerful product, but a powerful product without a little bit of a recipe can be hard to, like, you can't really PLG it. Also, like the contract sizes were way larger. So the FD role was really about putting yourself in customer shoes and trying to understand not just what they said were their biggest problems, but what you observed were their issues and how you could, being super intimately familiar with the software, how you could help them customize and build it to their advantage so that it ran amazing workflows and really worked for them. And that really that there's like a lot of soul required in that of like really, really deeply understanding your product, really understanding the contours of what can be built, being willing to build some custom stuff on the fly, having to understand the customer. So it really is like, it's a mix of engineering, it's a mix of like BD and customer success, like you're implementing pilots, etc. And the problem is, I think a lot of people are basically just thinking of it as like, well, we have a product and we will slightly customize it for our customer. And like, that's that. That's not really what an FDE is. So I do think it works for some companies where they have a really complex product. For some other companies where the user base is more homogeneous, like I don't think you really need it. But I definitely don't think it was a band-aid for Palantir. It was absolutely necessary. And I don't think that it's a good, trying to build custom software on top of bad base software is not a good idea. So redo the product. That's like not a good use for an FDE.
No, and I'll definitely put on the show notes the blog post that you were mentioning. What
Yeah,
are
it's
some
great.
And having worked with some of the best for deploy engineers that there are likely is at Palantir, what are some of the characteristics that make for an amazing FDE, and what advice you give to founders that are hiring for that position on either questions or things they should be looking for in this role when
Yeah.
it makes sense?
Yeah. I think you just really you're looking for people with versatility because you have to have really, really deep product sense. You have to be able to understand the product, but you have to be able to translate a really complex technical product to what very often is a non-technical audience and have them understand and see value. You have to have a lot of customer empathy and understand what customers want, but you have to also be willing to push customers because sometimes what customers think they want is not actually what they need. So it's a lot of a mix of many different things. In general, this is outside of just FD. One of the things I always recommend the companies and founders I work with to do is one of the things we did at Palantir was an interview called the Who WH. And that interview like really, really dove deep into who you are as a person. And it's kind of like a 2-hour interview where it starts with high school and you're probing like, tell me about your extracurriculars. Why did you pick to do that? Why did you decide to go to this college? Why did you study this? Like what did you do there? What was impactful? Why? And what you're trying to get to is understand how people think and how people make decisions. There's really no one right answer, but what you want to understand is that people are thoughtful, that they have like second and third order thinking, that they're taking like a bunch of different data points and like being able to apply it, that they have some humility and understand what they're actually really good at, what they're not. Like we used to always say that we look for really spiky people. And if you're really, really awesome at something, you're probably going to be really, really bad at something else. But you better know what that bad thing is. It's not an issue to be really, really bad at something. It is an issue if you don't know what that is. So there are all of these like more like soft qualities, I would say, in addition to being great at product and being technical and being gritty and being willing to work hard, that are super important.
Oh, that sounds like interesting, even therapy sessions, I would imagine, for the candidates, and many things to think after.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
And before joining the call, we were speaking how you run a weekly newsletter where you share some of your perspectives on the things that you're reading and seeing on the market. I was reading one of the posts that you were speaking how the models keep advancing, but they still lack that last mile reliability. As you invest, what frameworks do you use to identify which areas are short-term solutions that foundational model players will eventually solve, and which are areas which are more long-term sustainable opportunities for startups to tackle?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces of this, and I think there's a slightly different question if you're looking purely at AI infra versus AI apps. I think for AI apps, what is really, really necessary is that you're somehow a part of proprietary feedback loops. Essentially, it means that like you own the rights to the production traces, you have a sense of the evals, you essentially can compound on the data you have. So it's like if your customer is using the product all the time, you are learning from how your customer is using the product and you're as much as possible applying that real time and improving the product. That is what gives you a moat advantage over time because the models are generic. And I do think that there's some app applications that the foundation models will take over. You've seen foundation models get into search. You've seen foundation models start to try to get into like enterprise search and things like that. But those are like super horizontal workflows. Once you start getting into something super, super specific, it's hard to imagine that the foundation models care about doing like really specific workflows end to end that is like someone's like specific department. Once you get into that specificity, like I think that's where startups can shine. But then there are so many startups doing the same thing now because I think everyone sees the opportunity of AI apps. And so it's really necessary that you have a data moat and that you have compounding advantage over time. The more your customers use the product, the more you learn. So the stickier you are because you keep improving the product because you have that customer feedback. If you have a product that doesn't capture that, I think that that's really tough.
And related to this point that we just discussed, you also been writing about memory in your newsletter. What's your take on the space? Do you think there's a room for a specialized memory provider to emerge that's like a developer focused solution that helps other apps embed memory and manage memory in a more easier way? I've been also hearing a lot of people thinking that this is a problem or opportunity that will be more solved and the value capture at the foundational model layer, like even like an open AI. As
Yeah.
you explore this space, what are your takes on it?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because of course, if you are building an AI product, it is very much in your interest to own the memory layer. So I think one of the reasons that OpenAI has become more and more sticky is because they have memory. And so the model starts learning from your preferences. And then it's really hard. You don't really want to go and switch models and go explain everything. It's like, I don't know, it's like starting with a therapist all over again. You don't want to go tell your entire life story over and over and over. You want someone who just gets it. And so that's a huge, like, sticky thing for the models. I think that comes at the cost of consumers. It's just bad user experience that for every single app you have, if you have an AI, you have your like base model that you use for everyday tasks, and you have something else for coding, and you have something else for your emails, and you have something else for, insert all these other things that humans do. If for every single product you're having to like write out your own context, that's no fun. And so that's part of it. I also think from just like a consumer standpoint, like I'm a really big believer in giving consumers choice, and you should win by building great products and great experiences, not because you've locked them in. So I would love to see someone build something for portable memory. I think it can be both useful for consumers. Like, are you able to download memory and take it across models? I think that would be, I don't know that the foundation model companies would like that, but I think that would be really cool. I think technical feasibility is maybe something else. I think it's actually pretty difficult to execute, but I think that would be a win for consumers. But then there's another piece on the enterprise side that if someone was able to build like a true memory layer and that allows customers to onboard faster, in some ways that's your answer for the forward deployed engineer question, right? Because then I'm not having to have me as like the buyer at an enterprise don't have to go and like add all of this context and add all of these custom instructions every single time I onboard a new product, because I'm able to add in and call, the Jess Leão memory layer. And so I do think that there's a lot of interesting stuff to be built there. And I've been, looking for stuff in this space. And so if you're listening to this and you're building something like that, please call.
No, definitely. And yeah, on the foundational model players' role in this space, particularly, I've been thinking a lot about the incentives that on that portion of even empowering the user and having your portable
Yeah.
memory that you're able to bring on the others. For the
Yeah.
foundational
Like,
models to do it, they will have to take like hard decisions on really going against like storing and being they like OpenAI. They
yeah,
have a lot of your data. Would
exactly.
they be open to really make that portable for me
Yeah.
to use inside Anthropic or not? So that may
Yeah.
be the place where
Yeah.
it opens the opportunity.
Yeah, I think it would need to be a third party, like how to create a portable asset for consumers. Yeah.
The other topic that you've been writing about is the importance of taste, which is something that's been spoken a lot about now. How do you identify if a founder has taste, if you may call it like this, especially when you invest very early and it's really even founder pre-product or early version on the product? What are some of the things you look for?
So there are a couple of things. One piece of it is product sensibility. Because I invest in technical founders, I perhaps care more than most that the founder has really strong opinions on how a product should be built. I don't think that there's a right answer, but you want to see that they've thought through what should the user experience feel like? What are the trade-offs we're going to make in the product in the beginning? What is the most important thing to build? What do we add on later? Those are all really hard decisions. I think everyone has grand visions. I think that's a necessary condition of building a startup, right? Like if you're raising venture capital funding, you are no matter what shooting for the stars, but you have to start somewhere. And so you want to know that one, people understand constraints. I think, to the conversation we were having earlier, when someone is like, "Oh, I'll just build everything right away, all in one, and it's going to be great." It's like, well, that's not really how product building works. And so, how do you decide? So it goes back a little bit, like the who interview here applies in many ways also to talking to founders, which is like, how do you make decisions? Like, how are you going to decide what to build? Have you talked to customers? Are you spending time red teaming your own idea? And so again, I try not to be really prescriptive over exactly what I want to hear or what decisions people are making, because I think there are many different ways to build great products and many different great opportunities in the market. But you do want to see someone who has spent time talking to customers, challenging their own assumptions, thinking through, well, if this happens, then how am I going to do this? And like I've tried testing like these different two views of my product or how I'm going to incorporate data in these different ways. You just want to see someone who's like self-critical, not in a negative way, just that they're thinking about how they make decisions rather than just picking something and going with it. I actually think that that's how you develop quote unquote taste. It's actually more that you always try to have a sense of what is something that's actually going to work. And for you to be able to understand what's going to work and what's going to be good, you do have to have a strong opinion on what is bad.
And to your point on the founders that say that they want to build everything, the other thing is about how they manage that short-term, long-term perspective on the things that you prioritize short-term in that sense and the things you build over time. In the AI space, there is never a boring month. And this past month,
Yeah.
there has been significant controversy over the tweet or X by Cloudflare founder about Perplexity bypassing the no crawl preference. Beyond that specific case, what's your view on the paywall crawl model, and do you think we're moving towards a more closed internet? And if so, what are some of those second, third degree implications that we may be
Yeah.
seeing?
Yeah, I think the two big news that I was paying attention to was this was actually like the information reported on this, but Atlassian, said that they had noticed like unusual increase in API usage and that they were starting to enforce rate limits, which folks were guessing was directed at Glean, though they said, it's totally company agnostic. And then I think like Slack had blocked some AI companies from exporting and storing customer data, even if the customer had actually authorized it. Slack is owned by Salesforce now. And I was honestly very disappointed in Salesforce, very disappointed in Atlassian for those decisions. To me, it's such a no-no to restrict how your customers use their own data. I really believe that customers should own the data, not the applications. And so I understand the reasoning, which is essentially like, wow, there's so much value being created in these AI apps, and this data lives in my ecosystem. Why should I let another provider use it and make money off it? I should be the one creating the AI app. But then, like if you want that AI margin, then you should earn it by making a better product. Like go ahead and do it. Don't do it by blocking and shutting the door and not letting customers have a choice as to who they give their data that inside of the platform that they're using with you to some other provider. I think that's such a no-no. I think all of software is built on APIs, is built on collaboration. And I understand the hyper competitiveness of the moment. Everyone just is seeing such incredible opportunity and they don't want to miss out, and they don't want to lose on their own value. But to me, it's super disappointing. And I really, really hope that that's not the trend. And I will continue to call it out really loudly if I see it. As soon as I saw that, I wrote a post about it because I just thought it was honestly in bad form.
And for as a founder, you want to focus on the things that are under your control, but specifically for those that are building and relying on those Slack integrations, those Salesforce integrations, what advice would you give them at this moment of uncertainty in time on building a business that in many ways rely on those integrations?
Yeah, I think you just kind of have to be we're talking about like when adversity comes up, you have to be thoughtful about it. If like your company depends on unrestricted, unrate limit API usage, and there's a possibility that someone might rate limit you, then you have to start thinking, okay, if I'm going to be in a rate limited tier, can I get contacts from somewhere else? Can I build a different pipeline direct to the company? Is there a creative way to go around it? Should I be offering upfront some sort of paid access to ensure that I have this data that I really need? Should I be thinking about partner agreements with these companies? Is there a way to be creative? Again, my hope is these enterprises are that this is not going to be a trend, and that Atlassian and Salesforce will continue getting the pushback that I think they deserve for the move they did, and that other companies won't follow. But it's tough. Like, I think a lot of platforms want to keep their high value content and the telemetry within themselves. And so I think as a startup, you just have to be mindful around it. And again, like, be creative with the constraints.
The other thing that we were speaking yesterday is that last year people was very excited about open source, closing the gap. We had Llama 4 coming out, making huge noise, but so far kind of that initial wave of interest has faded away and more of a preference leaning towards closed source models. What's your take on the direction that the market is taking as it relates to open
Yeah.
source? And what are you hearing and seeing from the CISOs, CTOs that you speak
Yeah.
with?
Yeah, honestly, it's such a bummer because I am a huge proponent of open source. Again, going back to Mosaic, that was part of the thesis. Like, I do really believe in open source, open weights AI. I think if you play back the movie, Llama 3 was released in 24, and it was so strong. It was, best in class open weights. Benchmarks were great, like wide distribution. People were super excited about it. There was just a real sense that Meta was holding the entire open source movement of AI and the industry on their backs, and that it was really excellent. I felt like they were catching up like really quickly with the closed source models. And so, when you think about technology, usually like these things like accelerate like in these slopes. And so you kind of were imagining that it would somehow meet pretty soon, and that like open source usage would proliferate. Sadly, if you play the movie out, then a couple of months, I think Llama 4 came out in April of this year, I believe. And it was a bit of a flop, like the reception was kind of cooled. There was like some controversy around like the benchmarks. There's like some underwhelming sort of like real world performance, like maybe what was in the benchmarks is not really what people were experiencing. And so they're like really, really tempered expectations versus what was the like Llama 3 moment. And then and this is all I'm talking about the US ecosystem, right? And then most recently, OpenAI released their open weights model. And I do think it was notable, but it was notable more in a symbolic way because it was a good model and they finally released it. And now people, can't keep making fun of them for being called OpenAI when they're super closed AI. But it really was symbolic. Like it kind of was like mid-pack on leaderboards and benchmarks. So it's like, it's useful. It exists. People can use it. I think that also for like more simple tasks now, you can use like GPT OSS instead of the closed source models. Maybe it's cheaper, etc. But it wasn't like this epic, like, oh my God, this was incredible. On the flip side, I do think we're seeing some really, really interesting stuff coming out of China through Qwen and DeepSeek. They are like almost like consistently at the top of the leaderboards. They keep pressing on like the price versus performance frontier. So it really feels like they're pushing the envelope, but obviously there's a ton of geopolitical risks and issues with using open source models from China. And so the US has kind of fallen behind, candidly. So it's sad. I think when I talk to customers right now, folks are like, yeah, we're kind of good with just closed source models. They're reliable enough. They have support. I run them on Azure, I run them on GCP, et cetera, and I'm good. So I do think we're in a little bit of a down moment from a sentiment standpoint. But again, I'm an optimist and I am a huge believer in open source. I think it will be a really critical component of the AI future. And so I remain I remain optimistic and hopeful that we'll turn the curve again. All these things come in seasons.
Yeah, no, the other part is that it seems like it's been a lot, but it's been 3 years since it all really took off.
Yeah.
And a take I have is it will have a moment again once like enterprises, they are now deploying their first application or been in the market for some months, but they are starting optimizing over times where I think maybe open source will regain a bit of that momentum. And
Yeah.
inspired by your comment on how Palantir ran the interviews, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that we were speaking as well yesterday, we were starting to see a shift from pre-training to post-training. As you see that shift and identify it, what's your mental process that you have as an investor? And okay, I'm seeing this shift that I'm identifying in how you convert that thought into are there investable opportunities here? Yes, no, and where they may be.
So I think there's a couple of things. One, like I think the focus to post training versus pre training really came with reasoning models. That was essentially like the big breakthrough moment, and it was a really big moment for reinforcement learning. Of course, like I think scale also comes along with it. So basically, you kind of have to have a really smart base model in order to then like force it to think longer and then come up with better ideas. So they go in tandem, right? Like reasoning improves, but you have to continue improving the base models as well. But I think the big shift was essentially like we used to think compute is all you need. And it turns out maybe compute isn't all you need. Like you can also optimize things from like how long you think in tasks, and you can do reasoning essentially. That's one piece. I think the second piece is that it does shift a lot to inference, right? Like if we're entering a world in which it's all about thinking and thinking budgets, that's like the core of the core of reasoning, is that it's not just about shoving a lot of data and making the model larger and then that's it. It's actually that the output changes depending on the complexity of the task. And so it moves a lot of the costs from pre-training to post-training and thus inference. What are the downstream implications? Like one is usage, and it's more expensive for companies to run AI because the money isn't just in the pre-training that the foundation models incur. It's happening when they are calling the query and the model is deciding how long it thinks. And the more tokens you use in thinking, the more expensive. And so there are all these implications on the customer side that I think startups now have to think when they're thinking about pricing. One of my partners at Decibel, Dan, writes a really cool series called Tokenomics that talks about the shift in pricing for AI models. And I think it's really important for startups to consider that. So I think it's really less around like investing themes and more that I want to see startups being thoughtful around how they price and how they're going to go to market. And then I think the other big lesson is, it turns out that reinforcement learning is really important and that feedback loops are really important. And so again, that goes to the question to how do you have a moat? Well, you better be finding a way that you're capturing value from customer data so you can use reinforcement learning and you can make your product better.
No, and another great resource to add in the comments on the blog post that you make that you do from Dan. You work very close with technical founders. With
Yeah.
AI, we're starting to see a surge in the amount of researchers that are becoming founders. What are the things that get you most excited about a researcher when he becomes a founder?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I'm such a team founder person. Like, I have a lot of founder empathy. I really believe in the greatness of founders. I think there's a lot of bravery involved in starting a company and being willing to go through the journey. And so I do think that folks come from all different backgrounds. There are people that have like tons of experience selling product that don't make great founders, and there are people with no experience in the real world that become great founders. So I don't really think the background matters. The lesson does apply that you want to be thoughtful around how do you leave academic thinking and go into the real world. If you talk to my founders, like a lot of them are going to say, I give the same advice over and over, which is around like, we have to leave academic thinking and we have to try something out. I'm not a fan of debating things to infinity and being like, oh, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that, and sort of like theoretical academic discussions. You can't really do that in startups. You have to find a way to do a small controlled experiment and go test it out. And can you do it through building a demo that's a little vaporware, but then you get customer feedback? Can you do it by creating a landing page? Like, what are micro tests that you can run to test out assumptions? You can't make decisions based on like academic debating. And so what really matters is like, are you able to take your academic ideas and think about how you're going to apply them to a product or some sort of paradigm. And as long as you have a thoughtful answer to that and you're willing to test it out, I don't really think what your background is matters.
And we are approaching the end of the podcast. So to close, I would like to do a quick fire round. I give you 3 quick questions and you give me your quick reactions.
Sounds good.
What do you say is your most contrarian take that you have on the overall AI market?
I think I'm very fatigued with AI apps. I actually think that AI apps are commoditizing in many ways. Not that there isn't a lot of opportunity, but there's just so many people entering the same market, and it's the same data over and over and over. And so you have to have I think you have to be able to find a really unique thesis for why it's interesting. And otherwise, I'm actually really excited about exploration and combination of AI with other sort of data. So instead of just the data of the internet and language and text, what are ways that we can push the envelope with real world data, whether that is in robotics, whether that is in biology and human data. There's just all these different pockets of data that I'm excited to see how folks explore. And I actually think that there are going to be different ways that you have real world assistance and tests, even inside of traditional SaaS companies. And so I'm excited for people to start getting creative around that, because there's a little bit of flavor of commoditization even across the AI app companies. Even though everyone says that it's actually the model layer that's commoditized, I actually don't think that that's true.
That's a good take. What's something that you changed your mind about the space in the last couple of years?
I mean, I think that by far the killer application of the past 2 years and of this cycle has been coding. And I don't think that was expected. When I first started seeing the coding companies come out, it was hard to imagine why, with the distribution that Copilot had, why those companies would succeed. And it, to me, is such a good lesson as to why you should believe in startups. I think it is such a fallacy to always assume that incumbents win because they have distribution. Not to say that distribution isn't a huge advantage. It totally is. But great products can win sometimes. It's not enough. You have to really execute, but great products can really win. And it was just a great reminder. I don't know that I really changed my mind, because it was more that it was a surprising thing and a good reminder. I don't think I'm generally not the person that you go to say no, all the incumbents will win. And, I think you can't if you're an early stage investor, I think inherently you believe in the underdog and think that, new people win. But it was surprising and a good reminder.
Yeah, no, I still recall 2023, actually a good percentage of investor market, I think, was trailing toward the incumbent will win, at least
Exactly.
in our conversations. And the last one, a bit personal to close. What are you optimizing for in life? That thing that you wake up every day to, and also how that aligns as well with your role as an investor.
Yeah, I'm an insatiably curious person. I really, really love reading. I love thinking. I love sort of intellectual debates and thought exercises. And I've always tried optimizing my life to be one that I was learning a lot and discovering interesting things. I really feel so incredibly grateful to have the job I have. It's a job where I just get to be super intellectually curious and read every day and learn a lot and be really deep at the forefront of what the world is going to look like in the future and how we're going to shape things. And so that really keeps me going. I just think it's such a privilege and so fun. And it's just so fun to see things created from nothing. It's really working with founders and seeing them make things come to life is really special. And I really try not to take it for granted. I think it's so awesome.
No, Jess, I highly appreciate your time. This is an amazing conversation. Thank you for joining.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.